So, tonight we'll try to keep it a little bit short because there is a Kingsway program at 8 o'clock. Project Witness. There's a movie that's being shown at Kingsway. So, if you are planning on making your way there, I'd like to leave you enough time to get there. So, hopefully, we'll be done by 7:30. We're up to the last 8 or 9 psukim of the Haftorahs of the entire 3 weeks that we have been doing. So, I'll try to make an appropriate big sum up conclusion at the end, but a very short one when we get there. So we're in the middle of the Haftorah for Parshas Nachamu. Parshas Veschanon, the Haftorah known as Nachamu Nachamu Ami. And we were talking over the last couple of days, first about the idea of Klal Yisrael being comforted over the Churban, over the destruction, over the tremendous losses and all the various Churbanos that have happened to Klal Yisrael over its history. But then, yesterday, we took a kind of major turning to talk about the incredible glory that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or more properly, as the Rambam says, we can't talk about what Hashem is because it's too vast a concept for human beings to be able to grasp, to be able to even describe. What we can do, says the Rambam, when he talks about the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13 principles of faith, is we can talk about what Hashem is not. We don't say Hashem is kind. We say Hashem is not unkind. Even though we say Osa Chesed, but the idea of being kind sounds like it could have limits, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not that. We don't say Hashem has no limits. Well, that is sort of what we do say. We don't talk about the limits that Hashem can transcend. We say Hashem has no limits. There's no concept of limits by Hashem. What we have to do is we have to, in a slight way, anthropomorphize. To understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu in human terms, we talk about his mighty arm, as we have been until now. We talk about his charon af, even though we don't understand what that means on a godly level. It's something beyond our comprehension. We try to imitate, we try to be what Hashem wants us to be, but there's only so far we can go. Rav Shamshon Hirsch once said, Christianity is an attempt, is created by man to understand God. So Christianity is an attempt to take God and put him, kivayachal, as if it were possible, in a persona. That's why they made God into this tripartite God with a human element. Because they're trying to have man explain what God is. In Judaism, says Rabbi Hirsch, it is God explaining man. So what Judaism is all about, what the Torah is all about, is how we're supposed to act. What God's derech is that he laid out for us. In Christianity, they try to explain what God is, and they do a very poor job. Because what they do is they twist the image of God to suit what they want to say. And what they want to say is we don't need to have mitzvos to limit us. And what they want to say is we can be all love. God is all loving. And so you're forgiven for everything. Now, in Yeshaya, we know God forgives us a lot more perhaps than we deserve. But we don't have any illusion that we understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan is and what his cheshbon is. The Holocaust is indescribable and unintelligible in Christian terms because it makes no human sense. In Jewish terms, quite literally, that's the point. It makes no human sense because we're not meant to necessarily understand what God's grand cheshbon is. It's a slight but very different take on the universe. And the more that Reform Judaism in Rav Shamshon Hirsch's time tried to take on the trappings of Christianity, the more that Reform tried to be less Jewish and more Goyish, as it were. Rav Hirsch said, that's where you lose us. That's where you're giving up on everything that Judaism contains and everything that Judaism is meant for. I was thinking a lot today and yesterday about a rabbi that I mentioned a little while back because I saw a video with him by accident, a Rabbi David Ingber, who grew up modern Orthodox, who went to Ramaz, went in his own direction, and became part of some kind of Judaism he calls renewal Judaism, where he favors drumming during Shabbos davening to focus the people. And the way he described it was, at the end of a particularly good drum session, as if it were the Grateful Dead, he says, "Hey man, that was really spiritual." And this Rabbi Ingber is more erudite than I am. He knows more Torah in some ways than I do. He's an expert with the texts, but he's not following what they're telling him. He is trying to imprint his own take on it, that basically, like they said in the 60s, if it feels good, do it. And unfortunately, that is not what the mitzvos were that were laid out for us. And both he and the other particular rabbi that I was watching in the dialogue are looking for a kind of Judaism that they create, rather than the one that was handed down to us, that is pretty unambiguous with what's supposed to happen. So Hashem continues. We're up to Parak Mem Pasuk Yud Ches, wrapping up the Haftorah of Nachamu Nachamu Ami. And Hashem says exactly this, Ve'el mi sedam yun el. To whom can you compare God? Who is a dimyon of God? We know we are Tselem Elokim. We are in, whatever that means, the image of God. But a dimyon, like to be a parallel or a contemporary or a colleague of God? The last several psukim yesterday taught us very strongly not to even go in that direction. Umadimus tarchulo. What likeness would you arrange for him? And unfortunately, the Navi Yeshaya has an answer. Hapesel nosach harash. Always it's graven images. Always it's avodah zarah. Not us. We're so much more sophisticated than those people. We don't have avodah zarah. Secularism is not avodah zarah, except when it sort of is. AI is not avodah zarah, except when we sort of treat it like it is. Glorification of human technology is not avodah zarah. My cell phone is not avodah zarah, except when I can barely put it down and I can barely live without it. All of these things have elements. What I quoted from my barrel wine the other day. Avodah zarah is anything you prioritize over HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's really a degree of avodah zarah, of worship that is strange. Worship of the outside, worship of the foreign. If you worship something more than you worship Hashem, if you can't be parted from it for a 3-day yontif, then you have a problem. It's not to say I'm advocating throwing anybody out of the kihila, God forbid, of the chevra for texting on Shabbos. There are addictions that are very hard to break. But in terms of what we're striving for, we're striving to go beyond the limitations that we sometimes set for ourselves. You can't compare me to anybody else, but Hapesel Mosach Harosh, the graven image has been melted by the craftsman. V'tzoref bazahav yirakenu, and then the smith plates it with gold. So first you take lead, and that's a real statement. The fact that we go in order from a very base metal at the core of the pesel is a very, very bad symptom. It's a very bad degree of what's going on. Hang on, I'm going to put something in the chat because I promised myself I would. There was a story in the Jerusalem Post in 2016. And, you could look at it yourself later. I'm sorry, not Jerusalem Post. It was in Haaretz. Let me see if I click it. Is it the picture or is it the article? I think it's the full article. The picture is the best part. A 7-year-old Israeli boy on a religious kibbutz found a 3,400-year-old Canaanite figurine. Beautifully preserved Canaanite figurine could be a fertility goddess or possibly a depiction of an actual woman because it's a feminine silhouette, but the headdress or the absence thereof are the questions about whether that's a person or whether that's supposed to be a goddess of some kind. Allegedly, the figure is unclothed, but that's not really part of it. But what's interesting is the look on the kid's face, because it's the size of 2 adult fingers. So it's this big, this pesel. And the child is holding it up with a look of glee. Like, look, I found a toy. except it wasn't a toy. It was somehow imbued by the people who worshipped it with supernatural powers somehow. And that looks like Narishkeit to us. And we don't stop to think that in 20, 30, 50 years, 100 years, after all of us Nebuch on this Zoom are gone, they're going to look back at what we looked at with adoration in our eyes, and they're going to say, really? That little rectangular object that you carried with you everywhere and charged up every 10 seconds? Really? And the kid's face is just beautiful, because we're still here and the Avodah Zarah is forgotten and we don't even really know what it was. And that's a tremendous thing. So you take a piece of lead or clay, and the smith plates it with gold, Resukos Kesef Tzoreif, and the jeweler puts chains of silver attached to it. And Hamasukon Teruma, the person who is wealthy, the person who can afford a real gift, Truma, but not Truma in the holy food sense that we use it. Truma in the sense of somebody giving a gift to an alien god. The one who can afford the Truma, Eitz Lo Yirkav Yivchar. He's going to pick a completely beautiful tree, a tree that has a long lifespan, oak, teak, cherry wood, that's not going to disintegrate easily. It's a tree that does not rot. Lo Yirkav. Yirkav, Yud Reish Kuf Beis. That's rotting like fruit that goes bad. Charosh Chacham Yivakesh Lo, and he'll find himself a skilled craftsman. Lahachin Pesa Lo Yimot, to prepare a graven image. So you take lead, and you take gold on top of it, and silver on top of that, and a wooden pedestal, and you make it gorgeous. And the end result is Lo Yimot, but it's a pestle that cannot move. It's a pestle that has no life force. It's a dumb object. It's an inanimate object. The Ramban has a classification for the 4 forms of matter that are in the world. The highest is Medaber, the human being who can speak. And then there's the Chai, the Behema, the animal that has life and can move, but doesn't have the power of speech, the gift of speech. And then there's the Tzomeach, like plant and vegetation. That's something that at least can grow. It might be a flower, it might be grass, it might be gone by the morning, but it grows, it has life, it has chiyus of some kind. And then at the bottom there's the domem. The domem is the absolute dead silent mineral, the piece of rock, the piece of clay, the piece of metal. What did we make this pesel out of? Everything that's dead. Lead, gold, silver, wood that's been chopped off from its growth. Only dead things. Only domem. What good is your cell phone when it's not charged? I'm sorry, I'm really going after cell phones tonight. I didn't expect to do this. This is just coming out. I have no problem with cell phones. Some of you are watching on your cell phone. I am greatly appreciative. We have Ima's phone right here in the crowd. Why would I put down cell phones? But what do you call a cell phone when it doesn't get charged and it loses its charge completely? Or it burns out? They call it a brick. What a beautiful phrase. A brick. Because what's a brick? A domem. A dead stone object that is worthless for anything but a paperweight. You can't even build a house out of a cell phone the way you can out of bricks. Ask the 3 little pigs. First little pig, straw, and then wood, and then cell phones? I don't think so. Bricks. What an amazing concept that we would sell out HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like we said in Yeshaya 2 weeks ago. In Yirmiyahu, I'm sorry. That we sold out HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Be'er mayim chayim, lichros lohem boros nishbarim, asher lo yachilu hamoyim. We have God in our corner, the awesome God that can measure the universe. I ripped Neil deGrasse Tyson yesterday. I'm going after everybody this week. I'm taking no prisoners. I ripped all the astronomers and all the physicists. And we're giving up God for Avodah Zarah? We're giving up God for that? We have the eternal, and we take a piece of lead? Halo Seidu? Do you not know? Halo Sishma'u, says Pasuk Chaf Aleph? Have you not heard? Halo Hu Gad Meirosh Lachem. Was it not told to you since the beginning? Since the beginning of what? Since the beginning of all. Bereshis bara Elokim, from the very beginning. Hashem was here. Hashem was there. Hashem was truly everywhere. And every when. Every when, because God knows no strictures of time. There is no time to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond all of that, which is incomprehensible to human beings, so we try to find science fiction and time warps and black holes. And so Neil deGrasse Tyson, in his summary of the universe, says in the beginning, to show off, that he is akin to God. And then says, but this is all speculative physics because we don't know. Hello, God Merosh Lochem. Hello, Havino Sem. Did you not understand Mostos Haaretz? The very foundations of the earth and the universe. Hayoshev al Chug Haaretz. Sorry, there's like 8 pages of notes on that one pasuk about how everything is all set up for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits above the circle of the earth. What a beautiful concept. Imagine, if you will, a spaceship, the Apollo 13, not the Apollo 13, that's the one that almost blew up, the Apollo 11 that made its way to the moon. That is, whatever it is, 1969, 2019, 50, 54 years ago this week. Apollo 11 reached the moon, I think, July 20th, July 19th. Right here. And what did they see when they looked at the earth? They saw the circle of the earth. Not the circle of life, like the Lion King. The circle that is the earth, the planet, the round planet. This could mean that, and it could mean any number of other things. The Mefarshim likened the planet to like a set table that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is above. The heavens are the circle or the compass of the earth. The Navi compares the heavens to a compass with 2 movable, rigid legs. One is stationary, and the second one, you draw the circle around it. I mean a compass like we used to use in grade school. I think most of us are old enough to have used one of those. They don't use them anymore. But you know, the pointy end and the pencil end, and you stick the pointy end down and draw a big circle around it. That's what the earth is, the center of the circle. Not necessarily the center of the universe. There was a big argument about that on the Shavuos speech that came up this past year about whether or not the sun goes around the earth or the earth goes around the sun. I'm not talking about the orbit. I'm not talking about denying physics, but I am talking about the center of creation, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, man is the keystone. We are the center. The universe revolves around us in the sense that we are the only beings with speech, with dibur, and with thought. And Koheles says, who says that the soul of man goes lamala to the shamayim? Maybe it goes lamata la'aretz, like the behema. We have to be careful which urges we indulge, how far we go in which direction. Yoshveha kachagovim, and from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, all the inhabitants of the earth are like grasshoppers. Think about being on an airplane that's landing and you see the tiny people down on the ground, standing up on the Empire State Building and looking down and seeing the little cars like toys. To HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knows no physical limitations, we could be seen that way. Hanotech hadok shamayim. Hashem stretched out the heavens like a curtain. There are 100 billion stars out there just in our galaxy alone. All of these stars. And Hashem spread them out like a tent for all of us to dwell in. And every star that we see up in the sky at night on a beautiful clear night, maybe you go to the mountains and you don't have the city in the way, those stars are all bigger than our sun is. And our sun is enormous. So we're seeing light from 86 light years away that may have already gone out. We don't know. The speed of light, 86,000, 86 million? I'm losing track of my speed of light. But if you think about it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the great perspective that we lack. Hanosein roznim la'ayin. And bringing it back down to earth, Hashem brings tyrants to nothing. Vladimir Putin was riding high. How's he doing lately? The whole Ukraine war bogged him down. He was a very major power to be dealt with. Is he still? Maybe yes, maybe no. But when Hashem decides his time is up, his time will be up. We met Adolf Hitler earlier in the week. He was riding very high in 1933, 1939, and by 1945, he was in a bunker whining about how it was everybody else's fault that everything fell apart on him. The tyrant falls quickly when Hashem decides for it to happen. Often they choose attacking the Jews as a shortcut, and that is something that ends up not doing well for them in the long run. Ask Paro what life was like after the Yam Suf. Not so good. Great, powerful people. In one graduation at my college, we had Anthony Weiner give a speech, and we know what happened to him through his own doing. We had Karl Kruger give a speech. He went to jail shortly thereafter. And we had as the keynote speaker Bernard Kerik, the former police chief, who also went to prison. All in 2003, we had all of these guys. And by 2010, we would never have imagined having them back. And this year, not one single politician came to our graduation because Kingsborough has a reputation for anti-Semitism, and some of the politicians did not want to be affiliated with us. Oh, how have the mighty fallen. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu topples them when the time comes. Shoftei Eretz Katohu Asa. The judges of the land. And on the internet, aren't we all judges? All those great columnists, all their great predictions of what's going to happen. Katohu Asa. He made them like things of nothingness, of vanity. Everybody who sets themselves up to judge other people had better be prepared. Isn't that New Testament-y stuff? Judge not, lest ye be judged. Well, when ye get judged, sometimes it's not exactly the way you want it to go. Chavdalad af bal nita'u. As though they were not planted in the first place. Af bal zora'u. As though they were not seeded and sown. Af bal shoresh ba'aretz gizam. As though their trunk never was rooted in the earth. V'gam noshaf bohem vayivashu. And Hashem blew on them, and they dried up. A hurricane does terrible, terrible damage. Usa'ara kakashti sa'im. And the mighty wind, sa'ara is the Hebrew word, sa'ara is the Hebrew word for a hurricane. If you've ever seen the aftermath of a tornado, of a hurricane, of God's wind, it's not just trailer parks that get torn up. It's everything that gets torn up. We're fortunate, but Hurricane Sandy was really scary to somebody like me who had never seen a hurricane before. And I wasn't in the eye of the hurricane. I wasn't in the zone that got absolutely wrecked by Sandy. I just saw the aftermath. But it was like nothing had ever taken root. It was just ripped up. The deeper the roots, the stronger you can be and the longer you can survive. But if Hashem chooses to uproot you, you're not going to stay rooted for long. The 1,000-year Reich of Hitler lasted 12 years. Ve'el mi sedam yuni ve'eshveh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu repeats. To whom will you compare me that would equal me? Or ve'eshveh, that I would be equal to? We started tonight with a dimyon not being possible. We start wrapping up tonight with the dimyon not being possible. There is no one who can be compared to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yomar Kadosh, says the Holy One. We watch science fiction movies, and we watch superhero movies, and we read Greek mythology. I was fascinated with Greek mythology as a kid.
Me too.
And you see all of these gods, and you see all alleged gods, and all of these figures of great might. None of them compare to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in any way. They are human creations to express our own passions and weaknesses and limitations, but on a powerful level. One of my favorite comic books as a kid, great movie that came out 5 years ago, 6 years ago, was Shazam, where little Billy Batson, an orphan who sells newspapers, ends up meeting a wizard who imbues him with the power of 7 great figures. The S is for the wisdom of Solomon. The H is for the power of Hercules. And then the rest of them I don't remember. I think Apollo, Zeus. He's got incredible power. And he says the word Shazam. And he gets hit by a lightning bolt and he becomes all-powerful. But he's still a kid. And so he still makes dumb mistakes. And half the plot of each comic book, they were very funny, they were very well written, is to get him to accidentally say the word Shazam, or to put a hand over his mouth so he can't say Shazam, so he can't get the power of being Captain Marvel after all. And even the great Captain Marvel had problems because they got sued by the Marvel Comics people because they were using a name that they wanted to use for a female superheroine that they had. There is no real power like this. Vel misadam yuni ve'eshven, nobody, says the Holy One. Kadosh means not only holy, but also set apart, different, unique. Finally, last pasuk of the Haftorah. And it's funny, it does not end as one would expect a Nechama Haftorah to end. And we'll all be redeemed, and we'll all go back to Eretz Yisrael, and there's going to be Tchias HaMesim. That's the kind of big happy ending that we're expecting. But the happy ending to the Nachamu Haftorah sounds nothing like the rest of it, unless you think about it. It's designed to make us think about it. Se'u marom einechem. Lift up your eyes on high. Uru'u mivara eileh. And see who created all of these things. Go beyond. There's a Paul Simon line in a song I like very much from 1991, where he says, he wanders beyond his interior walls and runs his hand through his thinning brown hair. And I remember that because in 1991, my brown hair was not thinning. I was a youngin'. I was 24. I was about to get married. But he looks beyond, he travels beyond his interior walls. Is a severe limitation for human beings. Paul Simon being one of them. God knows what he could have done in Torah or Chazanos if he had been inclined in that direction. All I know is the great legend when I was a kid that Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme was really a tune for Lecha Dodi from Paul Simon's grandfather. I do not vouch for that being true, but it works very well for Lecha Dodi, but they might throw you out of shul. See who created all of this. Hamotzivim ispartziv ha'am, who takes out their hosts by number. L'chulam b'shem yikra, and calls each one a name. What are the names of all the millions and billions of stars out there? We don't have names for all those stars. We ran out. We can't even see many of them. But Hashem knows each one by name. And the Mefarshim point out the idea, Merov onim ve'amitz koach, that we finish the pasuk, Hashem is great in might and strong in power, ish lo ne'edar. Not one is missing. What does it mean not one is missing? No man is missing. So that might refer to human beings. But what Rashi and the Ibn Ezra and the Radak explain is that not even a single star or planet is missing from the firmament. Because for all we know, all of creation would collapse if one star wasn't where it was supposed to be. There's a concept when you build an arch in architecture of a keystone. The keystone is the lodestone. It's the stone that bears the entire weight of this remarkable concept where you could have something pointed that doesn't fall down because it's incredibly solid. But there's one stone in there somewhere where if you pulled it out, the whole thing would fall in because it's holding up the whole house of cards. You ever played Jenga or you ever use dominoes to build something or Lego towers? If you pull out the wrong one, that's the lodestone. That's the one holding them together. For all we know, every star is the lodestar that holds together the universe. But we don't know which one is which. We could never know which one is which. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows which one is which. Earthly creatures die. Stars, except when they're supposed to, do not. There's all kinds of speculation about the death of stars and black holes and red dwarfs. I read up on this when I was a kid in my third grade level science books that I never got beyond. That's as much science as I was meant for. But it was all speculative because nobody had ever seen a dying star. We have to invent what would happen because we don't know what would happen. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu does know what would happen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the powers of each star. Astrology is real. Mazalos are real. There are aspects of the heaven and the earth that we're never going to understand. So why is this Nachamu? Why is this our coda for 3 weeks of Haftorahs? Well, if you think about where we've been and where we're going, you realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu is eternal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's universe is as he designed it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's vision is what crafted and maintains the universe on a daily basis. But what does he call himself all the way through Sefer Yeshaya? Kadosh Yisrael. So you know what? If we have a Churban, if we have an Inquisition, if we have a Holocaust, if we have a Kishinev pogrom, if we have Gzeres Tachvatat, if we have expulsions from France and England and every other country on the world, Hashem still identifies himself as Kadosh Yisrael. And what we just learned in this Haftorah all the way through is that having anybody else in our corner is a false idea, because there is no one else to be in our corner. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we don't need anything else if we just rely on him. So the ending message of the 3 weeks is that we need to put our faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We need to not worry about whether we're there to see it when the time comes. But all of our cards have to be on the table. We have to go all in for Hashem. Where did we start? We started with Yirmiyahu, telling us in the first 2 Haftarahs, in the first 2 prakim of Yirmiyah, how could we sell out God for nothingness and pointlessness? How could we be hypocritical? How could we be leaders who lead our own people astray? How could we be a cheating spouse who doesn't stay loyal? How can we do these things? And we understood the Musar, because it was a Musar that anyone could understand who's in a relationship, or anyone could understand who's in a human relationship or a community, how important the ties are, and how important keeping faith and loyalty is. And then we heard Yeshaya on Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz, where Yeshaya talks about our terrible failings. And it's the first parak in the whole Sefer. 66 prakim. All the Haftorahs of the year practically come from him. But it starts with Chazon. And it starts with the terrors of what we did wrong and then how we were going to suffer in compensation for that. Then the Haftorah of Tisha B'Av, the eyewitness who saw the devastation, Yirmiyahu. We'll hear it on Thursday morning. Pay close attention. It's horrible and terrible, but awesome and epic all at once. And then at the last in Nachamu, we finally get a sense of who it was we betrayed. We didn't just betray a spouse. We didn't just betray, like in Shir Hashiram, Ani Ladodi V'Dodi Li, my beloved is looking for me and rings the doorbell. No, we betrayed the most awesome entity that has been, is, and will be. But it's Nachamu because we are reassured that we're going to find our way back. How could we betray HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's beyond thought to trade in a guy who has everything. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Notice how these millionaires and billionaires come and go. When Steve Jobs was my age, he was about to die less than a year later. And he had everything. Human beings are ki yavesh chatzir novel tzitz. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the answer to everything. So if that's the message that we've gotten in the past 3 weeks, through a lot of depressing and scary and terrifying haftarahs, it's this, that if we put our trust in the one who chose us, and the one who chose us is unfathomably eternal, then wow, what a reward we're going to get later. And why sell him out for the cheapness of lead encased with gold, encased with silver, placed on wood? What good are any of those things that are domem when we've got the spirit of eternity with us? So that's the best I can do as an encapsulation. 7:36, so there's still plenty of time to get to the Kingsway program tonight.